Okay, so this is going to be a tutorial about how to use Plotly to make a graph of your physics data from an experiment. So let's say you did an experiment where you had different number of bulbs in series and you found the current in the circuit, and you also found the terminal potential difference for each setup of bulbs. And we did that 4 times. We found the averages for each of those. So you have the average current for each trial here, the average terminal potential difference here, and you also calculated error bars for each number of bulbs. So the error bars here, we're just using the half range formula, which is the maximum minus the minimum divided by 2, half of the range. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is take that information and just put it in the columns in Plotly. So you can rename a column by going to header, rename header, and I can call this current. Confirm, and I can put my current information there. So I'm just gonna copy my data over now. Okay, so I've got my data in 4 different columns. These 2 columns are my actual data with averages, and then these 2 columns represent the error in my experimental data. So every time we want to add a graph in Plotly, it's called adding a trace. So we can add multiple traces on one graph, but for now we're just going to add one trace. So we're going to click plus trace, and we want a scatter plot. For our x-axis, we want to have current. So I'll choose current averages, and for our y-axis we want to have terminal potential difference, so I will select that. And very quickly we get a nice graph here. I can label my axes. And I could even give it a title here by clicking up here, give a title, we'll call it terminal potential difference versus current. Okay, so we have our basic scatter plot. You can see there's a negative trend in the data, or there appears to be a negative trend in the data, but we want to know how reliable that is, so we need to add error bars as well. So to add error bars, that is editing the style of this particular trace. The trace is this series of 4 dots, and if we click on style, because we want to edit for that specific trace, we click on style and then trace, go all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see error bars X and error bars Y. So because we have different amounts of error depending on which trial we did, we are going to have asymmetric error bars. And we don't want to use percent error because that's not particularly meaningful for our data, because we know how much error we had in our data. So instead we're actually going to use the data itself. So I click asymmetric and data. And because we're dealing with the X error bars here, we're talking about the current. So for error plus, I choose current error, and error minus, I also choose current error. So that just gives me positive error bars and negative error bars on the right side of the point and on the left side of the point. So that's for the x-axis. If you're interested, you can change colors and whatnot. That's not really important, but there. We can also have vertical error bars. So we click our Y, again we click asymmetric, and we want to use our own data. And this time, because we're on the y-axis, it's terminal potential difference error for the positive part of the error bar, and for the negative part of the error bar, also terminal potential difference error. And I guess I want those to be roughly the same color, so I'll make those pink as well. Okay, so just like that, we've got a pretty nice graph. The error bars show very specifically how reliable each data point is. A few things that we want to do with our graph is we want to have a trend line. So to do a trend line, that's a form of analysis. We're analyzing our data a little bit more carefully. So that's under the Analyze section. In particular, this is called curve fitting. Now, if I look at my data points, they don't appear to have a curved shape. It looks like a straight line with a sort of negative correlation. So when I choose my fit, my fit for this curve, and I have to choose a trace, I've only made one trace. It's just this graph with this 4 dots. So I only have trace 0 to choose from. If you had more than one graph, you might have to choose here which particular graph do you want to do a curve fitting for. And then, like I said, I think this looks like a linear pattern, so I select linear for my family of functions, but there are lots of other types of functions you could choose. And just click Run, and it will throw a nice trend line in there that not only goes through all of the error bars very clearly, but it also is quite close to all the points. So it looks like our average values are pretty reliable in terms of showing some kind of relationship between current and terminal potential difference. And one last thing that we might want to do in looking at this graph is change the scales on the axes, because to be honest, I kind of want to see this graph starting from 0, 0, and I'm also a little bit interested on what the y-intercept might be. So in order to do that, this is a style issue. So we're going to click on Style, and we want to look at the style of the axes for this. So if I click on Axes, I've already given titles. I'm not going to worry about this, so I will collapse that. Range is what I'm interested in. So for my x values, it looks like ranging from 0 to 0.3 is a pretty nice range. It's trying to do this automatically for me, but I can just choose custom range instead, and then make my minimum value 0 and my maximum value 0.3. And I can do similar for my y-axis. So my y-axis looks like the biggest it's going to get is about 7.4. So I'll leave, when I go to my y-axis, and I go to custom range, I guess I'll leave the max here, 7.44. That's fine. But my minimum, I want that to be 0, just so I get a nice idea of this. And oh dear, look at that. It's not very nice at all, is it? It's very sort of condensed here. So another thing that you can do, if you're interested, is you can zoom in on a particular region of the graph in Plotly by, let's say you want to look at it from 3 to 7, or 3 to 7.4. You can, I'm just clicking and dragging up here, and you can select as much or as little of that graph as you want to look at, and it will automatically zoom that axis for you. And you could even drag the axis up and down if you would like to adjust it that way. Similarly with the x-axis, you can drag that like so. Okay, so just a brief introduction of how you can use Plotly to quickly get a graph with meaningful error bars and do a line of best fit.